do you have a plan? Like, what
Right.
is your plan? And do you have a plan that's been specifically customized for you? I see this all the time.
What would you say is the most critical thing for any dentist out there?
So I think there's a couple. Number one is
That's incredible. All dentists know the common career paths. But how do you know which path is right for you? And are there other options out there?
On this podcast, we will be chatting with industry experts. We want to bring you the knowledge and resources you need to take your career to the next level and break down those industry secrets interview by interview.
We are here to ignite a revolution in the dental landscape
And help you, the dentist, build the career you have always wanted.
I'm Dr. Cassidy Reeder,
I'm Carter Frank.
and welcome to the Revolution Dentistry Podcast. All right, welcome guys. I'm Cassidy Reeder, here with Carter Frank. This is the Revolution Dentistry Podcast, where we help you with the strategies to build lasting success for yourself and your family. So today, we're fortunate enough to have Jonathan Moffat on. Thanks so much for joining us today, Jonathan.
yeah, thanks for having me on here.
Yeah,
Good
of
dude, good to
course.
be on here.
Thank you. So Jonathan, he's got a long family history of dentistry, beginning with his grandfather, who was an orthodontist. His passion for helping dentists achieve time and financial freedom began at a young age after seeing the effects that poor financial decisions had on his grandfather. He began his career helping dentists in 2006 when he and his father started the DDS Strategies group to help dentists become more organized and efficient in their personal and professional lives. At Palomar College and Woodbury University, Jonathan has taught the subjects of estate, tax, goal planning, and business strategy. Jonathan is the founder and CEO of Aligned Advisors, where he has helped many dentists step away from the chair by creating more time and money freedom in their lives. Jonathan also started a dental group and grew it from 1 to 8 practices in under 3 years, which he says has helped him be a better advisor to his clients. Jonathan has also served on the faculty of Henry Schein's Dental Business Institute to help dentists finalize their business plans for practice ownership. Wow, that's quite the resume there. You've got an incredible amount of experience in the dental industry, Jonathan. We're so grateful to have you on. And I'll go ahead and kick it on over to Carter.
So, Jonathan, do you mind telling us a little bit more about your background and about the experiences that shaped your passion for helping dentists?
Yeah, and I'll just it took us a little longer than 3 years to get to 8 locations, uh where my passion lied, I mean, you said it in the intro, was my watching my grandfather. I was very fortunate to have 2 grandfathers that were very close to me and who I was very close with and were very integral in my life up until, in fact, one of my grandfathers, who's one of my heroes, is still alive today. He's 96 years old, and I
Wow.
talk to him all the time, and he still gives me amazing advice on life. And it's been fun for me to watch his perspective change as he's grown and aged and become more wise. But both my grandfathers were doctors. My mom's dad was an MD out of Texas, Dallas area, and my dad's dad was an orthodontist. And so seeing them both be successful in their professions was a really neat experience for me. And I still remember going into my grandfather's ortho practices, and he would wear a bow tie to work every day, and he was jovial and he was fun. And as a kid, you don't really know; you're just kind of there, right? And I always loved going to their house because they always had good treats, and and he was just a fun guy to be around. And it wasn't until I was in college where my grandfather, right before my junior year in high school, my grandfather had a heart attack, which subsequently forced him to stop practicing orthodontia. And he, at the time, would have been like the late 90s, mid to late 90s. Um, there was kind of this belief that unless you were a GP, if you were any kind of a specialist, you couldn't sell your practice wasn't really worth anything. There wasn't really anything to sell. Like, what are you going to sell as an orthodontist? You don't really own the patients. They're all referred to you. You're finishing cases, right? And so he had 5 or 6 practices that my uncles and my dad didn't know any better. And they just kind of let him, because my grandfather wasn't healthy enough to work, they just kind of withered away. And I'm sure the
Hmm.
patients got absorbed by other colleagues, and that was it. And so I remember the summer between my freshman and sophomore year of college going to up to my grandparents' house, and my grandfather was just a totally different man. He was depressed. He would sit on the couch and watch TV all day. They were making really rash and like irresponsible financial decisions and not really telling anybody. Like they'd sold their dream home, didn't tell any of the kids. They just sold it because they thought they couldn't afford
Wow.
it, even though it was almost paid off. But because they didn't have any savings, because he would made a ton of money and was super successful, but spent a lot of money and had a lot of very kind of checkered past with bad investments and listening to bad advice. He I remember going up and visiting them between my freshman and sophomore year, and I'll never forget. It's just like so vivid, like walking through their front door, going into the living room, watching seeing my grandfather just kind of sitting like a vegetable on the couch, watching some midday boring TV show,
Right.
and my grandmother was gone, and I just was kind of there to help, right? Like, hey, can I mow the lawn? Let me help, kind of like help around the house, and he wasn't in great physical shape at the time. And I'll never forget, I was in there, I was doing something, I don't remember what I was doing. I was cleaning in one of the bedrooms, I think, or organizing the garage, or can't remember exactly. But my grandmother came home and she just looked exhausted. And I remember talking to her, and she was saying that at her mid to late 70s, she was having to start teaching flute lessons and taking students again just to make
Wow.
ends meet to help them pay their bills. And I just remember, like, that was left such a huge impact on me that when I went back to school that next fall, I did I changed my majors, like I changed my major like 5 or 6 times. Like I was all over the place.
Sure.
But going back after that meeting, I was like, I want to help people. I gotta like I had a passion. I had a clear passion and direction for like I want to help people avoid ending up like my grandparents. And my dad
Yeah.
was already in the financial services kind of wealth management business. And so it was kind of easy to I'd come home in the summer, I'd work for him and I'd get that experience. But that's where really my passion lies. And, ever since 2006, 2007, when we really decided to go focus specifically on dentists, um, that was one of the main reasons behind my passion. People always ask me like, why dentists? Obviously, I have that personal connection through my grandfather, but
Right.
we also did a lot of research. We did a lot of demographic research. We did a lot of just research in terms of like where the economic forecasts were going and heading, and what was interesting was we narrowed it down to either veterinarians, optometrists, or ophthalmologists, and dentists were kind of the three that would kind of narrow down to,
Hmm.
as far as just kind of, I think, have a really bright future. And we actually wrote a paper called it's a white paper called "The Future of Dentistry." It's been revised a
Right.
few times, where we take demographic research and we actually talk about where is dentistry headed in terms of just looking from a demographic standpoint, right? Looking of
Right.
how where people are born, different age groups, and then what's happening because of the economy and the different economies that's forcing and kind of creating the environment that we're seeing today, which really is the perfect storm and perfect opportunity why a lot of DSOs are snatching up practices, is
Right.
because a lot of these dentists are not prepared for retirement. Their
Hmm.
biggest asset is their practice. And when you have a group, a DSO come in and say, "Hey, we can give you this huge amount of money for your practice," they're like, "Well, yeah, let me take that," without really maybe considering all the potential risks or or rewards of that
Right.
decision.
That's incredible that mentioned this landscape that's so different today that, didn't exist in the past. And you mentioned a lot of dentists are struggling and are not well equipped to face all the changes that are going on in the industry today. And my I guess to follow up with that, a question I have is what are some of the challenges, maybe just one or two top challenges that you notice dentists face in today's industry, and how are you able to? What's some advice you have to help them overcome that?
Man, it's a good question, and obviously the answer changes, right? It's a very
Right.
circumstantial. It depends on the circumstances, both of the economy of. I mean, look, you could go back when we asked this question 3 years ago, 4 years ago. It was staffing, right? We couldn't hire staff. We
Okay.
couldn't get anyone to come to work. We couldn't find people to come to work. We were having people great high turnover, right?
Right.
And there's a myriad of reasons for that. Now we're in an environment where I think a lot of offices are finding it hard for patients to accept treatment. By the way, these are problems that aren't, these are all, those problems are always there. It's just different circumstances that are
Right.
sometimes out of our control may cause those to be, may cause those to be worse or better at certain times, right? So, for
Sure.
example, if it's a bad economy, you may have an increasing level of patients who are choosing not to accept treatment, or choosing maybe not to start treatment, or not to do elective procedures that maybe they
Right.
don't, unless it's a have to, they're going to choose not to.
Right.
If it's a situation like we went through COVID, where there, and we had this kind of like hiring or staffing crisis, um, then then that, something like COVID could cause a situation like a staffing crisis to become worse. But what I think is, I think a lot of times we use those, or we have those as kind of excuses or crutches of why our office isn't doing well. The reality is, what I believe and what we saw in our offices and what I've seen with a lot of clients that we work with, is if
Right.
you actually just focus on the things that are within your control, right? Okay, we're having less patients accept treatment. Well, why is that? Like, let's look at why that is. Do we need to come up with more creative financing options? Are we spending enough time with our patients, getting to know them and understand what's important to them? What do they even see? And are we doing a proper job of educating the patient? Right. Again, I'm not a practice consultant, but I'm just saying, like, in our
Right.
offices, these were the conversations that we had. Right. And whether it's a good economy, a great economy, or a bad economy, a great economy, it might be a little easier to get patients to accept treatment, but you still have to have that hurdle. And as a business owner and as a visionary, you should always be looking at your practice or your business and as, okay, what if we have a recession? What if X, Y, or Z happens? How are our systems and processes, are our people trained? Are we prepared to be able to, be successful during that time? I could go down a list of clients that during '07, '08, the last kind
Hmm.
of, economic downturn that we had in our
Right.
economy. You guys are both too young to probably have to even know what was
That stress wasn't on me. That was on my
that. I
parents
know,
for
yeah,
sure.
yeah. So for those of us who were '07, '08, right? It was a very stressful time. We were in a recession and things weren't great. But the clients, a lot of offices were like dialing back from marketing because they saw marketing as like an expense that like an optional expense. And we had multiple clients who were doubling down, tripling down, quadrupling down on marketing. And 2 times, 3 times, 4 times their practice during those 2 years, right?
Wow.
Because they saw the opportunity, right? Or they bought a practice that was struggling. I know your dad, had, like, Dr. Frank did this a lot. Like, you'd buy a practice that was struggling, and then you bring that practice into your practice, right? And now you haven't increased your overhead, but you've increased your revenue, your patient flow without significantly increasing your overhead. So there are these strategies that are out there that if you're working with a team that isn't, a lot of times as business owners and as individuals, when we're in the trenches, it's hard for us to pick our head up and look around and see where all the opportunities are, and also take a look and say, well, okay, is it really as bad as I think it is, or is this just kind of, am I making this to be maybe bigger or worse than it is? Whereas if you have a team who's been through those cycles, who's gone through those downturns and upturns, and who knows that, just like any other analogy we could do, whether it's sports or life or whatever, if you just stick to the basics and you do the
Hmm.
basics really well, you're going to have a successful business, kind of no matter in whatever economy there is, because you're always going to be ready and prepared and looking for opportunities and ready to jump on those opportunities when they arrive. And so I don't know that I've really answered your question because,
No, yeah.
yeah, but
I would say you have. Sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, I think there's a myriad of, again, it's like, are we talking about more like the practice, the personal? Obviously, there's this huge push to sell practices to these DSOs and these groups, and I've got some very specific thoughts around that. And but really, what I think it all boils down to, and I know we're going to get to this here in a little bit, is, what do you have a plan? Like, what
Right.
is your plan? And do you have a plan that's been specifically customized and built specifically for you, for your goals, for what you want to accomplish? Or are you just, what I think most people do is they go to meetings, they go to seminars, they go to they go to webinars, they listen to their friends, their colleagues saying, oh, I just sold my practice for a 10x. Oh, I just got this much money. Oh, I just, right. And what I know is that most of the time that's actually not correct. Either they don't understand the deal or they don't have all the details or whatever. But because we hear that, we get all excited and then we go, oh, I want to do that too, without fully understanding how's that going to impact. Is that even the right decision? How is it going to impact you? How is it going to impact your goals? How is it going to impact what you want to actually accomplish without a plan? And I see this all the time. Every day, literally
Hmm.
every day, we see this where these doctors are making decisions without a clear plan of where they like. How does decision A lead us? Does it get us closer to where we want to go or further than we want to go? And they don't have that
Absolutely.
plan.
I mean, that plan would be really important.
Yeah.
So, what would you say are some common mistakes that a seller would make when selling to a corporate DSO?
So I think there's a couple. Number one is not working with a team of advisors who understands the deal structure and has been through it many times, not once, not twice, but like many, many, many times they've been through that. If you work with an inexperienced team that doesn't understand how these deals are typically structured, every deal's different, right? There's different nuances. There's a general kind of theme that runs through most deals, but the nuances and the specifics of the deal. How long do you work back? Is there a clawback? Are there holdbacks? Are there indemnity holdbacks? Are there like all these things that we typically see? What are the ramifications for how they can claw back equity? Can they claw back equity? What does your equity actually mean? Have they done have they already recapped? What did that look like? Did it hit their targets? Like all these questions that most certainly the dentist isn't going to know how to ask or isn't going to know, and most advisors that they're working with aren't going to know. It can
Hmm.
be the most detrimental piece to the entire deal, because if you're given the wrong advice or make a bad decision or don't understand all the details around the deal, it's like I said, you could be ultimately selling your practice for much less than you could just on the open market to another doctor.
No, that's a really great point you make. And, that I would say that advice tailors so well to the dentists who already own a practice, who are looking maybe into a transition, right, in that phase of their life. What would you say? I'm going to bring this back to maybe some dentists who are maybe a little bit younger that are in the beginning of their career and are debating if ownership is right for them, if entrepreneurship is right for them, because uh, you know I myself am very familiar with a lot of talk of just being an associate, working for a DSO or whatever the case may be, avoid ownership. But you, with Aligned Advisors, you guys tailor your services to help dentists create time freedom, money freedom. If they're interested in, eventually getting out of the chair, that's great too. If not, that's great. Help people create generational wealth. I mean, ultimately, that's a lot of what it's what a lot of dentists want. So, what have you noticed is, can you explain a little bit about the importance or the opportunity that exists in practice ownership, and how that may be a great tool to help dentists create this time freedom, financial freedom, generational wealth versus, just punching the clock.
Yeah, look, I don't want to say it can't be done because I'm sure it has been done,
Right.
and there's there's probably examples that if I sat here and thought hard enough, I would have to, we could probably come up with, but it's certainly a lot more difficult to create time freedom, step away from the chair. In fact, you can't, it's impossible to step away from the chair, and create generational wealth as an employee. I mean, that's just the reality of it. If you're a W
Okay.
2 employee where 40 to 50% of your check is being taken by taxes, you don't have the tax benefits. Most of the time, you're probably living paycheck to paycheck because you've got a big house and a nice car, and right.
Right.
It's so difficult, in my opinion. And again, it's just, it's proven, right? So you saw me speak at our event last month. I always
Right.
ask this question is think of the wealthiest person that you know. Just think of who that person is and how did they amass that wealth? Well, the reality is it was more, I'll be willing to bet, is either through business ownership or through real estate, right? And probably a combination of the two is my guess.
Right.
And so if we know that that's the pattern to create wealth, and not just like a little wealth, but like life-changing wealth, right? Like generational wealth is owning a business and real estate, then why are we trying to kind of recreate that, right, recreate the wheel? Now, if you're an employee making, I don't know, $1 million a year, again, my guess is like 40 to 50% that's going to taxes. And you lived really frugal and you were able to sock away 200,000 a year or whatever, and sure, could you do it? Absolutely. But as a business owner, you actually get to keep a lot of that 40 to 50% that you would have paid in taxes. So now instead of socking away 200,000, imagine socking away 700,000, because you're not having to pay taxes on
Right.
that extra 40 to 50% that you were. Now, I'm not saying you wouldn't pay any taxes, but a lot of our clients pay less than 10% in taxes every year
Wow.
because of the tax strategies that they use, right? So now you
Hmm.
make $1 million and you're paying less than 10%, you're taking home a lot more. You don't get to do that as an employee. That's one of the biggest benefits of being an owner, a business owner. And then from there, you get to build. We talk to clients and teach them about how do you put the systems and processes, a team in place to be able to step away from the chair, right? So most of our
Right.
clients, they come to us because they say, I want to cut back either entirely or, to a couple days a week, or entirely here in the next 2, 3 years or the next 12 months. I want to have more freedom. I want to have more time, but I don't want to give up this nice revenue stream that I've built. And in my opinion, the best passive income strategy, I've said this on many, many webinars, many videos, many podcasts, and I don't, again, you're gonna have a hard time convincing me otherwise. But in my opinion, the best passive income strategy is owning dental practice or practices, is the best passive income strategy. Now,
Wow.
people listening to this are like, what do you mean passive? I'm working in the business. Right. So in our group, now again, I'm not a dentist, right? So I may have had maybe some advantages, but again, you might say, well, that might be a huge disadvantage because I'm not a dentist. But in our group, we owned 8 practices. Um, I was only working 2, maybe 3 hours a week on that business. That was it, right? So you can dental practices and owning dental practices and running dental practices, in my opinion, is one of the best um, passive income strategies. And if that group of 8 practices is doing $14 million a year, and we were doing about
Wow.
17% EBITDA or a net profit. Again,
Yeah.
I don't want to do the math on that, so I'll I'll round down actually to 15% on 14 million. What is that? That's 1.4 plus another
I can
7,
take
so
out my.
$2.1 million, something like that,
Wow.
right? In net income that
Yeah.
could potentially be passive income, right? So
Right. Right.
again, you're gonna have to own a lot of real estate. You have to work a lot of jobs and have a lot of second and third and fourth jobs to get $2.1 million worth of income working 2 to 3 hours a week.
And really quick, I just wanted to highlight that because that just shows the opportunity that exists in the dental industry, especially in today's market. I mean, you see a lot of people enter the dental industry that aren't dentists, right? Because they see the opportunity from the business standpoint. And so I feel like that just goes to show how much more of an opportunity, or how much of an opportunity that there is, and that dentists need to be taking advantage of. And they need to be aware because, a lot of us dentists, we're not trained in traditional business strategy. And so, a lot of these opportunities are not being taken advantage of from us. But in reality, I feel like dentists have an opportunity and that they should take advantage of, because it's just proven that, like you just mentioned, the dental industry, dental practices are one of the best opportunities for investment that exist. And dentists, yeah, definitely need to take a bigger stand and take advantage of that opportunity more than they
Right.
currently are.
Well, listen, you ask yourself this, right? Like, and you don't have to be a super savvy business person to understand this. Like, why is private equity dumping billions of dollars into dentistry? It isn't because it's not profitable, right? So, I mean, you just you're like, okay, so obviously there's an opportunity. They see the opportunity here. So if they see it, you should see it too. It should be enough to cause you to go, huh, interesting. I wonder what's going on here, right? Now they have to churn that business. You heard capital, like capital events, right? Or
Mhm.
recapitalizing. They
Right.
have to churn that business about every 5 to 7 years because of their investors, because they have to pay their investors back, right? But what
Right.
comes the more interesting conversation is, what if they didn't have to pay their investors back? Would they still churn that business? And again, having talked to a lot of investment bankers and private investors in the space, the answer is no, I wouldn't. Right, unless you had a better use for the capital. Which again, I can tell
Right.
you, which and again, why do we? This is a we could go down this road a long time, which we're not going to. But for most of us, you're not going to have a better return on investment or a better use of capital than owning these practices. And so then again, brings to the question of,
Wow.
if you're looking at selling them, turning on and selling the practices, ask your question, why? I'm not saying don't do it. I'm not saying it's a good or a bad idea. We ended up selling our practices to a bigger group. So
Right.
that was the decision that we made. There were multiple reasons why we made that decision, but it's, you need to understand, why are you selling it and what are you getting in exchange for that? Versus a lot of times I feel like we see this big flashy number, oh, you're going to get X million dollars for this, and we get all excited. But when you take a step back and say, well, what if you didn't sell? Because you're going to have to pay taxes on the money, and then where you're going to invest that money, because not going to just have it sit in cash. Where are you going to invest? And if you invest it, is that investment going to give you a better return than what you're getting in your practices? And a
Right.
lot of times I feel like a lot of dentists make this decision out of fatigue, right? They're just like, "Dude, I'm so tired of going to the office. And if I have one more conversation with a staff member about a raise or a complaint, I'm going to lose it." By the way, I totally get it. I've been there, right? Like
Yeah.
times where I didn't even want to walk into office because I'm like, I'm going to walk in, I'm going to get hit with every complaint and how this person, and I got there. It took us about 2 years to put the systems in place and the team in place to where we were protected, and you can protect yourself from that. But a lot of times I see doctors making big decisions, life-changing decisions based on emotion of being worn out or burned out, instead of again taking a step back, having a team of experts in this field, having a conversation with them around, hey, now let's remove the emotion from this, and let's just look at this from the pure standpoint of, is this a smart either business or financial move for you? And then let's have that conversation.
I
And
love
that's
that.
what I don't see a lot of people have. I see very little to, I would say very none, almost none, having that conversation within that context.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Jonathan, obviously you've had a lot more time in the dental industry than we have, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of drastic changes that have taken place in the dental industry, a lot being in the form of industry consolidation from private equity. My question would be, what's your opinion on these changes that you've seen and the state of the dental industry as it is today?
Yeah, I think, look, it's kind of just the way that the industry is. I don't want to say has to go, but it's just kind of like how it's going to go, right?
Inevitable.
For all the reasons we've just discussed. Um, you have private equity coming in, and initially they were offering these huge numbers because they had to, right? They needed to get the ball rolling. So it's like, hey, we're gonna give you this insane multiples, and also again, different economy, interest rates were lower, things like that. There's a lot of other things that go into this, but there's also, like anything, when you start a venture, when you're just getting started, it's typically the people that get in first, they get the better deal, they get the higher multiples, they get right the better stock price, right? Because they're in sooner, they're taking, presumably, and in the investment world we say this happens because they're taking on more risk, right? So
Right.
one would argue that, like, let's say the three of us just decided to start a DSO today, and we go out and we try and buy practices. If you're a doctor and you're like, I can sell my practice to us three or Heartland or Aspen, like, and a major percentage of that purchase price is based on the performance of the stock and the future performance of the stock or the equity that I'm going to get in exchange for selling my practice. One would argue and could argue that it's probably a safer bet going with a Heartland or an Aspen than one of us, than our newly found group, right? That we're just trying out. So because of that, it's like any other investment, there's risk reward, right? So you're gonna get less money from Heartland or Aspen or one of those big groups, but it's more predictable of when they're going to recap, when you're going to get the money out. In fact, a lot of them already have models to where if you want out before a recap, they can buy you out. So they've already figured all that out. And so we are seeing lower multiples. We are seeing less kind of transactional money for the doctors. there's still some opportunities out there that I think are great, but again, I think we have to take a step back and say, before you even have that conversation as far as like, hey, I want to exit my practice in the next 5 to 10 years, you need to have a plan in place for what are all of your options. What are the kind of the pros and cons of those various options, and then you start to go out there and look and start accepting offers or getting an LOI or understanding exactly all the details behind that to see, does that fit what you need in order for you to achieve your goals. And again, that
Mhm.
piece we see missing. So private equity is still, I think, interested in the space. We've seen a little bit of a slowdown. Again, I think mainly because of the economy. It's it'll I think the next 2 to 3 years are going to be really interesting. I know of several large DSOs, 2, 3, 400 practices who are sitting on the sidelines waiting to recap, trying to recap, but they're not getting the
Right.
valuations that they want or that they need to get. And again, I think there's a few reasons for that. I can tell you that in my conversations with some of these CEOs and owners of these large DSOs, they're struggling with the same things that the guy who owns 1 or 2 practices is struggling with. They're
Hmm.
struggling with staff, they're struggling with team, they're struggling with profitability, they're struggling with growing EBITDA, same store growth, right? They're having those same struggles as well. Um,
Right.
and and then I think we're going to see more creative deal structures as well. I think we're going to see things where maybe it's more debt funded as opposed to private equity funded. I think you'll still see
Yeah.
some private equity, but I think we'll see a combination of that. I think you'll see some where they're going to have the selling doctor maybe even carry back some of that paper, carry back the note. So I think we'll see we already are seeing it. I think we'll continue to see some creative deal structures around that. And again, it all boils down to kind of peeling back the layers and
Hmm.
saying, okay, how does this deal fit for for you as the doctor, and does it help you achieve your goals or not, or does it
Yeah.
not help you achieve your goals?
No, yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And I really appreciate your insight there. And I guess that leads me into my next question here is, let's say that there's a general dentist out there, which there are thousands of them in this position, that own their own practices, right? And want to compete and want to do the most they can to get out of the dental industry what they deserve, right? But they are, forced to, I guess, compete with a lot of these DSOs that have a lot more economy of scale, access to supply at a cheaper price, all these different things. What advice would you give a dentist who's just trying to stay ahead of the curve, who's trying to compete, stay relevant, trying to create that wealth from being an owner that we discussed earlier? Because, like you mentioned, uh, the industry is going in this kind of consolidation uh, trajectory inevitably. It's following what the banks did. It's following what happened to medicine. It's following what happened, to all these different industries, pharmacy. But, what advice can you give someone in that position that I just mentioned, who's an owner, to help them stay ahead of that curve or benefit maybe from it, the consolidation as well? So like, there's a bunch of different ways you can go about that. Sorry if my question was a little muddled, but hopefully you kind of got the gist.
Yeah. As you're asking that question, I just one thought kept coming through my head over and over, and it's the slogan that Apple had when Apple was first coming out and to go to battle against IBM, right, and Microsoft, which
Hmm.
was think different, right? So
Right.
think different. Look at what they're doing. These groups are able to grow and scale mainly because of the whoever is backing the financial backing. But I think what you're going to find is you're going to find we're going to I agree with you. We'll continue to see consolidation, but what you're going to see is I think a lot of these smaller to mid-sized groups are going to continue to struggle. They're going to struggle to recap. And what you're going to find, I believe, is you're going to see these bigger DSOs coming in and buying up these small to mid-sized groups for probably some pretty good discounts because they're not going to really have a lot of other options.
Right.
In other words, so if you have a loan and that you're buying practices on, and you're struggling with profitability and you're not able to keep the covenants, the loan covenants that you've made with the bank, and the bank's basically threatening or does threaten to call your loan, meaning you now owe whatever, however many millions of dollars you've borrowed, and you can't go get another loan from anyone else because you're not profitable or you aren't having same store growth or you don't even meet their deal covenants. You're stuck. And you're going to
Right.
have to go either come up with the money to pay back the loan or go try and fire sale your practices to whoever you can to try and come up with the money to pay the bank back, or the bank's going to repossess your practices, which
Yeah, tragic.
I've already seen that happen a couple of times, right? We've seen that happen. And so you need to think different. In other words, what do I mean by that? Uh, Offer what these big groups aren't offering, right? So again, you talked earlier about associates that are in school or want to come out and have ownership. Like now, these bigger groups will offer them to have ownership. Yeah, come have ownership. But if you're a GP and a lot of these younger associates want mentoring, that's like one of their biggest thing is I want to be mentored. I want to learn how to do procedures beyond just kind of the drill and fill and crown. I want to learn how to maybe do third molar extractions or place implants or bone grafts or sinus lifts or whatever. A lot of these bigger groups are like, nope, we're not going to do that because we have specialists that do that. We just need you to diagnose, do the fillings, do the crowns, right? Do like kind of the bread
Right.
and butter dentistry. That's all we need you to do. And that's what they'll continue to do because that's what their model is. And so
Mhm.
if you are in a position to either train or provide that training or go hire out that training or pay for them to go to a course or can give them those opportunities to grow, that now you've just, in my opinion, you're now competing. You're going to attract better dentists that are going to stick with you longer and and that will be in a better investment in your practice. One of the biggest struggles that these large DSOs struggle with is turnover, high turnover,
Right.
right? I can point from my office to probably 3 different large national DSOs that are very close within 5-10 miles of where I'm sitting right now. And I can tell you, I don't go in there. I'm not a patient there, but if I did, I'd be willing to bet, and I'd probably win, that if I went in there every month, they would have a different dentist, a different front office, a different hygienist, right? Because there's such
Right.
high turnover in those groups, in those large groups, and they know that, but they're prepared for that. They're built for that. So how can you compete? Don't have high turnover. Have a culture that puts the patient first. Have a culture that drives off of patient referrals. If you're in a highly saturated area where marketing isn't working, how can you continue to market and grow your patient base? By thinking different, right? Getting
Mhm.
involved with your community. We have a lot of clients that do community dental days. A big again, I don't know. I could be wrong. I just know my little bubble, right? But I don't know that a large group like DSO, corporate DSO is going to spend the money to do a community dental day where you're going to offer to do dentistry for free for your community for an entire day,
Sure.
right? And give back to your community. There's so many things you can do to again think outside the box because they're limited. They're limited by their shareholders, they're limited by their board, they're limited by where they have their money from, by who's holding those purse strings. They're
Yeah.
limited to what they can and can't do. And so as you learn your competition and understand where their weaknesses are, you just build your practice around that. And again, over throughout my years of speaking and I've talked to a number of doctors who are like, oh, my strategy is to put a practice right next to XYZ national DSO. And I get so many patients from them because the patients are unhappy. They just walk across the street to my practice, right?
Interesting. Yeah.
Right. And it's like you got the Burger King strategy, right? How did Burger King know what was their strategy for where to put locations? They would look where McDonald's would do all the research and demographics research. Wherever McDonald's put a location, Burger King would put one right next to it, right?
Yeah.
So you just if you can think different by, again, improving staff retention, improving the patient experience, and
And
just
I liked your mentorship as well, that component of, having, opportunities for the dentists
yep,
to come in and learn not only, how to do practice ownership effectively, but if they're interested in all on four procedures or if they're interested in X, Y, and Z, giving them the resources to do that.
right.
And yeah.
Well, and I think that's when we were hiring associates for our group, we would spend a lot of time up front understanding what and really getting clear on what the associates' goals were. What do you want to accomplish? Where do you want to be in the next 12 months, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? What does that look like for you? Where do you want to be? And then we would put a plan in place to help them actually get there. Again, most of these DSOs, these large groups, they're not having those conversations. They're like, you're a dentist, you have a license, great, you start Monday, right? And then they just
Right.
know that person's going to be there for X amount of time, and then they're going to churn through them, and they got another person sitting there waiting to come in. And that's also why I tell my clients, this is why they have to entice them by moving relocation bonuses. We'll pay off some of your student debt. We'll give you a signing bonus. They have to do that because that's how they're attracting these doctors, because they know that when they do a signing bonus or a relocation bonus, whatever, the doctor's signing on to work there for a period of time, or they have to pay that money back. And that's where they basically handcuff the doctor to the practice, because they know in 18 months or 12 months or whenever it is, that doctor is not going to be happy there, because they're not learning, they're not growing, they're just coming in and doing bread and butter dentistry and getting paid whatever percent of collections, and that's it. And they're not growing as a professional. They're not growing or expanding their skill set, which I think most of us as professionals, we get a lot of fulfillment and enjoyment out of that, right? It's
Hmm.
getting better and growing and becoming a better professional, a better clinician, a better dentist is a big part of that. And if they're not given that opportunity, that's why I think they're losing a lot of their doctors and not retaining them.
Right.
Yeah. And like we mentioned before, you've helped a bunch of doctors with stuff like estate planning and business strategy. So, what would you say is the most critical thing for any dentist out there to focus on financially?
So I kind of already said it earlier, and I know it's a just kind of sounds like maybe a generic answer, but I can't stress it enough. And it's you have to have a plan. You have to have a
Hmm.
business plan. You have to have a personal plan. And the personal plan and the business plan, they better sync with each other. Otherwise, you're not going to be very happy, right? When I was You mentioned faculty for Henry Schein Dental Business Institute. One of
Hmm.
my roles, I'd go in on the last session, and I was the business advisor, was kind of my title. And we would review their business plan that they'd built over the last 12 months. Well, like 70% of them wouldn't even show up with a business plan, or it'd be like kind of a generic, like cookie cutter business plan, right? Which is crazy,
Yeah.
because like you just paid like $15,000 to go to this, and you didn't even really take advantage of the opportunity to
It's
put this
crazy.
together. But the ones that did, you could tell they put a lot of thought and a lot of purpose, and a lot of, and I've kept in touch with a lot of those people, and they're crushing it. They're absolutely crushing it. So you have to have a plan. You have to have a business plan. You have to have a personal plan. You have to review it often. So there's a study that I love to cite. It was from a Zurich-based research company, and they basically interviewed multimillionaires. I don't remember how many, and I'll get the specifics wrong or whatever. But they basically said that they went in, they interviewed a bunch of multimillionaires, and they said, what's some advice, or what's some of the biggest regrets you have financially? And the number one regret was not having a financial plan that was independently reviewed by an advisor frequently, so about once a year,
Wow.
was their number one regret. And that's a big thing that we talk clients about. We don't sell products, we don't sell insurance, we don't sell investment, we don't sell anything. We create a step-by-step action plan for our clients that looks not only to the next 12 to 18 months, but the next 3 to 5 to 10 to 20 years down the road. And then
Hmm.
we review that plan every 4 months with our clients to because their lives are complex. There's a lot happening. They're buying practices, they're buying real estate, they're growing, they're working themselves out of the chair, they're doing deals, right? And because their life is constantly changing, there's always something to talk about, to make sure that there's no surprises, to make sure that they're prepared, to make sure that they have an understanding of how are these decisions going to directly impact their future goals of where they want to be down the road. And I think that, to me, is probably the most number one most important thing that you could do for yourself, is have a plan. Sit
Yeah.
down
I
with
love
an
that.
independent advisor who's not trying to sell you anything, who understands your business, who understands what your goals are and how to get you there, and have them put together a step-by-step action plan for you.
I
Yeah. And
love
I
that.
agree. I mean, if you don't have a plan, how are you going to go where you want to go if you don't know where you're going? Right. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that just kind of highlights the importance of, making sure that when you do take this step to become an entrepreneur in the dental industry, that you know what you're doing so that you can rise to the competition, so that you can take advantage of the opportunities at hand. So, I really, what I'm taking away from our discussion here, I mean, there's so many great things that we discussed, but is the opportunity that dentists, have in today's economy to accumulate uh, not only success, but time freedom, financial freedom, and generational wealth. I really liked how you said that dental practices are among the most, if not the most, impressive, passive source of income. And I mean, it can be as passive or impassive as you want, depending on if you want to be in the chair or not. But I really like that you are able to help dentists understand if they do want to phase themselves out of the chair, how that's possible and why that can become such a lucrative opportunity, uh, especially, as you're looking into retirement and in that transition stage. Um, well, I really appreciate you coming on here, Jonathan. I feel like we covered so many incredible topics. The opportunity for dentists in today's industry for ownership is incredible. And, that's why so many other people from outside the dental industry are coming in because they want a piece. So I'm really grateful that you're helping dentists like myself be able to take advantage of these opportunities and get into ownership to create that success and that freedom that they're looking for in their lives and in their families' lives. Is there if there's like one piece of advice? I know that we've talked about so much, and you've already discussed that having a business plan is so important. Is that the most important thing that you can think of in terms of your last piece of advice, or would you say that there's another thing that's on your mind?
No, I really do. I really do think that that is the most important. You have a
Okay.
plan, both not just a business plan, but a personal plan for your life, right?
Hmm.
That addresses all of the aspects of your life. Again, as a business owner, most of our clients own multiple practices, they own real estate, right? They're this kind of entrepreneurial dentist, which we love working with. We love watching them and helping them grow. Um, it's having a plan that addresses all of those aspects in your personal life and your business, and then having it reviewed regularly, right? Address
Hmm.
all of the what if scenarios. What if you get into an accident? What if you I mean, again, I've been doing this so long, I've kind of unfortunately seen it all, right? We've had clients who've
Hmm.
been in a motorcycle or biking accident and literally cannot perform dentistry anymore. What do you do? What if you pass away? What happens to your practice and your assets? Does your spouse or significant other know what to do, who to call in the event that that happens, right? Unfortunately, I've received a phone call at 4 in the morning from the son of a client of ours who was getting ready to retire and passed away in his sleep unexpectedly,
Terrible.
right? And because we had a plan, we just executed the plan, right? But so it's really making sure that you have a plan. And not only for the bad things, but what about the awesome things? Growing a group to 20, 30 locations and selling it for $100 million, right? That's an awesome thing. But you better have a plan in place for what are you going to do to mitigate and reduce the taxes, and where are you going to put that money, and how are you going to invest that money? How are you going to make sure that that money does exactly what you want it to do, whether that's to give back to a charity or organization, or build a family foundation for your family, or create generational wealth, whatever that is. You better have a plan in place well before you get that check, because when you get that check, again, we've seen it. I've seen the doctors that get double digit in the millions of dollars checks, wired to them at the close of a deal, and a year later they're like, I spent through all my money.
That's crazy.
Right? But I've seen it, right?
Right.
And so,
If you
um,
failed to plan, you plan to fail. How about that?
yeah, and I think I can't stress it enough to know, and I think again, there's, I always say, like, for me, planning is exciting. That's why I do what I do. But for a lot of people, I think creating the plan is it's work, right? It's the kind of the boring part. It's the work. But what's fun and what's rewarding is when you see the plan come together and you see that you start checking off and ticking off those boxes on the plan. And you're like, holy cow, we're actually doing it. That's exciting. And that's to me what makes it all worth it, and gives you that direction and kind of those guidelines that we need to make sure that all this hard work that you are putting in and have put in is actually getting you to where you want to be.
Perfect. Well, Jonathan, do you have any? If someone wanted to reach out to you and ask you for help or advice, with their plan, with their business entrepreneurial journey, what would be a good contact way to contact you?
Yeah, you can go to our website, which is Aligned Advisors. It's ALIGNED Advisors, ADVISORS.com, alignedadvisors.com. Also, feel free to just shoot me an email, the letter J Moffat, MOFFAT at alignedadvisors.com. And you're free to shoot me a text too, 858-752-8396. So happy to chat with you, answer any questions. We have mentioned a couple things. We have a lot of tools that we give away for free too. Like if you're interested in the white paper, just shoot me an email, jmoffat@alignedadvisors.com. I'll send that to you. We've got a lot of planning tools, a lot of like pro formas. I have another company called DSO CFO. It's a fractional CFO, bookkeeping and fractional CFO company for the dental space. So we've got a lot of like, sample budgets, sample financial, sample pro formas, sample, like a lot of those things that we're happy to just share if you want those. So again, just shoot me an email, jmoffat@alignedadvisors.com, and Lori or someone from the team will get those to you. And if you want to set up a time to chat, we'd love to set up a time to chat. We do offer a complimentary, what we call a roadmap conversation. It's 60 minutes, so it's an hour. It's completely complimentary, but we go through and get really clear on your goals, your objectives, the values, things that are most important to you, and then benchmark where you are. And so at the end of that time, you actually walk away with what's really a really nice foundation and beginning for beginning to create your own plan. And happy to offer those to any of your offer to do a roadmap for any of your listeners who are listening. Again, if you're interested, just send me an email, jmoffat@alignedadvisors.com, and Miranda or Lori will get a time set up for us to have that roadmap conversation.
Incredible. Thank you so
Awesome.
much.
Well, Jonathan, this was a great time, very knowledgeable time. I appreciate you coming on here. This was
Yeah.
great.
Thanks for having me on,
Uh,
guys. I appreciate it.
yeah, maybe in the future we could have you on again to
Would love
further
it.
discuss more advice and how the industry has changed from that moment. So sweet. It was great having Cass. Do you have any closing remarks?
Yeah, guys, thanks for tuning in to the Revolution Dentistry podcast. If you're finding any of this information valuable, please make sure to hit that subscribe button and never miss an episode. We're here every week, and we'll see you next time. All right, thanks, guys.